Hey everybody, my name is Devin Townsend and I'm here with D'Addario to talk about stuff. I think music's the only thing that's reasonably easy for me, or at least less difficult than other things. I was really connected to musicals in the 70s. I was young enough that it was like an education in the correlation between emotions and tonality. I think it's fair to say that you can deconstruct any piece of music and be able to give some sense of how dissonance or consonance informs emotional reactions. But as a kid, seeing it so overtly displayed in the sense where it's like they're sad, clearly, or they're happy, clearly. And the music that went along with those emotions were often fairly consistent, right? Like major tonalities for happy or optimistic, or minor for sad or pensive, and being able to articulate those emotions viscerally through music, even at a young age, became a loophole. My fascination with music became more practical than anything else because I could express myself in a way that wasn't gonna get me in trouble, from my parents at least. Then I started becoming fascinated by echo, and it started with Judas Priest, I think. I remember hearing Victim of Changes, and KK Downing had the echo on the guitar, and the thing that I found so compelling about that, it's the same reason Jane's Addiction ended up being such a big thing for me later, is echo made even the most profoundly wrong choices intentional, and it kind of forces the hand of it just by having it insistently repeat. And so Judas Priest, Motorhead, Bon Scott, that sort of era, I just loved it. And then Van Halen, we're all in Metal Shop and we'd be making whammy bars and everybody passing around tablature for Eruption and everything. There was like a certain amount of like social collateral that came with being able to play an instrument. And I remember very specifically being in the band room, grade 8, and I'm a super awkward kid and I got shit hair and like the whole works. And I remember hearing these kids in the back room saying, "Well, I think that kid out there knows how to play guitar." So I came in and played a bunch of Judas Priest riffs, and all of a sudden these dudes were like, "Okay, you can be our buddy now." And I was like, "That's all you gotta do? Wow." And then Enya, I think that became a huge thing for me. Like the album Watermark was an extraordinary moment for me. But one thing to the next, and it all kind of informs the ability to articulate yourself, I believe. Specifically if you struggle to do that in other ways. My favorite film, I was 8 years old when I saw it, and it changed my life, man, was The Dark Crystal by Jim Henson. And that movie I remember coming out of that film, changed. Trevor Jones was the composer on that. And the theme throughout it, the da 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 da, in part because of the tonality, but probably it's more likely that the effect of the movie imprinted those kinds of intervals as being a representation of that feeling. Metal is a dynamic that I feel was undervalued by a music industry at large because it was tied to the aesthetic of, Motley Crue and all that shit. Because I was a very sensitive kid and consequently a very sensitive adult, I do find that it's visceral in ways that other music isn't, and it managed to scratch an itch. But as a dynamic, as a texture, right? More than anything else, when I was a kid, I was fascinated by nature. Being from Vancouver and up north there, my ability to recognize my own emotional process was tied to the weather. So if it was raining, I would be able to get a sense of what it felt like to participate in the rain through echo and suspended tonalities, like a ninth or a second. It always seemed to resonate with that. And also the mountains, the Rocky Mountains up there. We used to go on family vacations up north and we just drive for 8 hours. The emotional component of the scale of that was something that from a very young age I felt like a compulsion to try and express, I believe. I don't know what the reason was. Maybe it was just awe, or in some ways it felt like, and remains to feel like, it's the only tangible way to express appreciation for it. I think intervals are vibrational and they carry an energetic frequency that on some level we subconsciously don't have much of a choice but to participate in specifically culturally, right? Like a major, I've heard, is indicative of a sadness, or vice versa. And so I think whichever culture you're raised in North America, for me, I'm indoctrinated into what these intervals represent. And as opposed to raging against that, I'm like, well, that's what I do. And I like the idea of using echo as a way of sort of participating in the past while I'm playing, but still be able to see how that informs what the current thing is. But I think it's really as simple as I probably heard something during a time in my life that was of emotional significance, and it just hardwires itself to my process, right? All these things kind of like conflate, and I don't think I'm smart enough to argue it, so I just roll with it, It's like you'll have a bunch of guitars, but one of them's got a bunch of songs in them and the other ones are duds. So I think so much of it's intangible. Like you can't kind of orchestrate a bunch of things together in order to land on, an intangible, inspirational source. But I think you can hedge your bets by working on things that have an unpredictable aspect to them. If you're able to turn a bunch of knobs and it does something that you don't know why it's doing it, that's where I find inspiration. So like the Ocean Machine pedal, or like I'm working on a bunch of plugins on my own now that are there's a certain amount of chaos to them that I really enjoy. Maybe because in so many other aspects for much of my life I've been so controlling that I'm just enjoying the opposite now for a bit, right? Once you've failed publicly, the fear of that goes away to a degree. Well, after the third or fourth time at least. I've been fortunate to have been with many musicians over the years, and some of the failures are also, they're foundationally learning, because I recognize the intent that I had put into a lot of these things were like this weird kind of non-thought out democratic dictatorship, where I'm like, everybody has a voice, but ultimately it's going to be me, right? And that breeds confusion more than anything else. And so having gone through several iterations of the group of people that represent the music, I recognize, okay, that didn't work, and this didn't work, and this didn't work. And in my mind is like, progress is only an awkward conversation away. Conflict resolution through like emotional availability is almost the most important part of it. I got more ideas than anything else. The reason why I work with companies to make things is just because there are things that don't exist that I think would be groovy. But for me, right, like this guitar, I designed this one with the guy there for metal, because Les Paul looks so dorky on me that I was like, well, I want it to be like a Les Paul, like tonally, but because I'm in open C, the scale length should be a little longer, and I like the feel of a through neck, but I like the sound of a set neck, so if we can try and find a bridge beyond that. A lot of the ideas I have are so idiosyncratic that they just end up like super weird for others. But for me, I'm like, oh, that's great. Yeah, it's super fun. I want that, and I would like to use it, and it's of use to my process. And any of these companies that come up to me and they say, hey, do you have any ideas? I'm like, yeah, for sure. This is a funny one. There's people like, we're going to send you something and we want your opinion. I was like, I'm not sure you do, right? Like a lot of times people just want to be told that it's like amazing. And for me, I'm just like, I would change this, and this, right? And the companies I end up working with are like, yeah, cool, we'll do that. And then we'll send another one out, right? D'Addario. I've been using them for so long, man. There's other companies that came up and gave me a bunch of strings to try out and everything. And even D'Addario gave me a bunch of other strings to try. But I'm like, no, I like those ones, right? I like the XL, the 10 through 52. I've been using them since I was like 9. I'm not trying to challenge myself to change things that I like. Maybe if it's things that are causing problems, but strings, I'm like, yeah, I like the feel of them. They're smooth and they stay in tune, and they got colorful balls. I saved up for a pack of strings and I put it on, and I went to trim it and I broke it, and I couldn't buy another E string for another like 2 weeks because I had to mow the lawn. It was like a bum out, man. Because, I was like, I finally get a new set of strings and I put them on there and I tune up, and then I got a pair of clippers and went to clip what I thought was the loose string, which in hindsight, the fact that it wasn't loose should have been my first indicator that it was not a loose string. but I cut the high E, and it's like when you're 10 years old, like these kinds of things can be devastating, man. This life and this industry is always going to be throwing us problems and problems and problems, and somebody's kid's sick. This person doesn't like political, social ideologies. It's like you can't necessarily just have everything, so you're going to be stuck with like 12 or 13 people plus the peripheral aspects of it, like management or agents or significant others and whatever. So it's naive to think that it's all going to be utopian. But if you can at least be like, you have a problem, let's talk about it. If we're looking for clarity rather than conflict, you can navigate it, right? And fortunately, we're in a situation now that exists and it's healthy.